only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today. Be sure and visit us online at our websites, wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com, and also find us there on Facebook, and you can follow day-to-day what's going on here on the show and out there in the news. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton, and it happens to be Friday, so it's Good News Friday. We're going to talk about some of the things happening around the nation, some of the indicators. Sometimes we talk about polling. Sometimes we talk about legislation that's been passed or legal battles, all kinds of things happening out there. And there's a lot of good news. Sometimes it gets lost with a lot of the negative. David, I don't know how many people come up to me in the last couple of weekends doing live events around the country saying, love y'all's Good News Fridays. They really appreciate the encouragement, just knowing there's some great stuff happening out there.
Yeah, there's some good stuff happening out there. And speaking of good stuff happening, it's happening right now in most states, and that is early voting. Not every state does early voting, but this is good news, especially if we show up, if we vote biblical and constitutional values. This is a really good news. In so many states, we have great candidates, and I tell you, across the board now, there are so many candidates in so many states that essentially have already won their election as congressmen. And these guys that really will have token opposition, they are such a higher caliber class than I've seen in a long time. I mean, Ken Buck out of Colorado and Jody Heiss and Barry Loudermilk out of Georgia.
Hey, by the way, that was one of the events I had a few weekends ago. Barry
really?
said, "Tell you howdy." I saw him at a church there in Georgia where I was speaking, and he and his daughter and his wife, and you could just see the joy on them. Man, they are ready to get in the fight. I'm really excited for them, man. That's one of the good ones.
And he's a guy that when we get in the fight, it's going to be good for all of us because he's a good guy on so many issues. And you get the same thing with Gary Palmer in Alabama, and you got Cliff Didier out in Washington. And I got to be careful with that because Cliff's a really good guy, but he's an old Washington Redskins Super Bowl player. And
no,
we're in Dallas. We can't say good things
how
about
could
Washington
you say
Redskins.
that? You're a Cowboys fan. How could you say he's a good guy?
Well, I'm kind of a Cowboys. I'm not particularly a Jerry Jones fan. I'm kind of a Cowboys fan. But it's I'm back to the old class act Tom Landry days. Nonetheless,
there you go.
Clint is there he is in Washington State, and what a really, really, really cool guy. And he is a fighter with a backbone on the right area. And I'm looking at this saying this is such a good election cycle. And we're looking at the Senate races, and we're on the ground in a bunch of states in those Senate races, and they're looking like we have a chance to put some really good folks in office in these Senate races.
Well, you sent me an email just the other day. The guy in Nebraska, drawing a blank on his name now. Sass, I think is how he says it.
Ben Sass.
I mean, looks like from everything I've read about him, rock solid on conservative values and faith.
Pro-life guy, really strong. He's 20 points up or whatever it is now. It looks like, he's a shoe-in. And we got several guys like that are going to be such a difference in Congress this time. So,
what about at the state level, too? I mean, isn't it the same thing? I mean, I'm seeing legislative races. In fact, we got our first Patriot Academy legislative race won. A PA grad out in South Carolina won the primary there. Doesn't even have a Democrat, so he's in. There's lots of others that we've talked to and met, and that looks like they're going to be in the state legislatures as well. So it's up and down the ballot.
It is, but now there's a lot of really tight races, and those really tight races are yet to be decided. And it will be decided in a conservative or a liberal direction by whether or not we show up. And, we're talking races like in Louisiana, the Senate race there, the Senate race that's going in Arkansas, the Senate race in North Carolina. There's these neck-and-neck Senate races. The Senate race in Iowa, too close to call. There's just a bunch of these Senate races that are happening. But we also have a bunch of governor's races where we got really, really biblically, constitutionally strong people on the ballot there. Neck and neck, amazingly, Hawaii, we have a really good pro-life guy out there, Duke Iona, and that's a close race, too close to call. He's up, the opponent's up, he goes back and forth. Up in Maine, LePage and Mashaw, the race there is back and forth, and with with Paul Page, you have somebody who's proven to be pro-life and pro-marriage. Mashad, exactly the opposite. And the direction that Maine goes will largely depend on the churches and the Christians in Maine. You have Brown back in Kansas with Paul Davis, the same kind of a decision there. You have Mike Ross versus Asa Hutchinson in Arkansas. I mean, you have very clear worldview differences in these things.
Rick Scott out in
exactly.
Florida.
Chris and Rick Scott, exactly right. So there's a lot of these that we won't know till election night because the polling
when you say
right
neck
now,
and neck, it's neck and neck in terms of the polling, but these candidates are very, very different.
Yeah, great distinction. Yeah, it's not neck and neck in terms of worldview. It's neck and neck in terms of polling. The worldview is absolutely clearly different. And for anybody that doesn't know where their governor or anybody else is on these issues, go to ChristianVoterGuide.com. There's a link there for every state. You'll find voters' guides in your states that deal with biblical, moral, religious, conservative kind of issues. And if you don't know where your guys are, whether they're for Congress or for Senate or whatever, and so many of the states also, it'll tell you about state reps and state legislators. Rick, you mentioned state legislators. I mean, these are voters' guides that will give you this kind of guidance on a conservative, biblical, constitutional viewpoint for where these guys are. And you're right. So many of the states, the worldview is miles apart. They're polar opposites. But we
really have a choice. I mean, Proverbs tells us when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. And it's up to us. Are we going to choose righteousness or wickedness? There's a lot of clear choices there on the ballot. David, very quick break. We'll be right back. We'll pick up on the election cycles that's coming up. The great news that there are good candidates on the ballot. A lot of people sometimes stay out of the elections because they think there's no good candidates. Don't do that, folks. A lot of good folks on the ballot, and it's going to make a big difference whether you show up or not. Back in a moment with David Barton here on WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday.
This is Dr. Tony Evans with the Urban Alternative, and I have one simple question. Do you plan to vote? If not, why not? It's an opportunity to participate in this republic in a unique way. Don't stand on the sideline and throw stones when you can get in the game and cast a ballot.
This message brought to you by National Religious Broadcasters, reminding you, make plans now and vote November 4th.
This is Governor Rick Perry. Throughout American history, people of faith have risen to the task of meeting difficult challenges. Today, we're once again being called to action to restore our nation, this time at the ballot box. Your vote is your voice. When you vote your values, you send a message that America remains one nation under God. I'm Governor Rick Perry, and I'm asking you to stand up and be heard. I'm asking you to vote this November.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. It's Good News Friday, and we've been talking about all the good candidates on the ballot from U.S. Senate races, congressional races, legislative races, up and down the line. David, we threw out a lot of names there in that first segment, but you gave us a source to go to right there at the end of the segment, ChristianVoterGuide.com, and that way you can actually study the ballot before you go in to vote. You actually pull down those voter guides and look at every one of those candidates that's coming up in your particular state.
And it's a real key. And by the way, we also have on that site a lot of various things that will help you even with your friends. I mean, we have an app on there that you can put on your Facebook site that will tell you which of your friends are registered to vote. And in many states, you can still vote. You can still register up until the day of. Some states you can't, but some states you can with provisional type ballots. And so there's a lot of things you can do to still get people out. And
the videos too. You got a lot of really good videos. Those can be shared on Facebook. In fact, churches should be playing those on Sunday morning and Wednesday night, whenever, over the next couple of weeks to let their folks know.
They're designed to be used in churches. They're designed for nonprofit. They've been approved by all the Supreme Court attorneys that do this on a regular basis. These are things you can show in your church to get church involved. You can put voters' guides out in your churches. By the way, the National BlackRobeRegiment.com. Black Robe Regiment is named after what the British called the preachers in the American founding. They called them the Black Robe Regiment, and they blamed them for the American Revolution because these preachers were so involved in standing up for what was right. So there has been a resurrection of that kind of mentality in the church today. And so preachers are starting to stand up. And if you go to NationalBlackRobeRegiment.com, you'll find a number of voters' guides there that are already approved for use in churches. And in some of these states we talked about, and there's a Kansas voters' guide, and there's a Hawaii voters' guide, and there's voters' guides for Arkansas and voters' guides for Florida, all these different places. And you can get that off Christian Voters Guide, but you can also go here, and they're already church ready. So all you have to do is print them and put them in your bulletins, or you can put it on your church website. Here's the link to this Voters Guide. And these are ones that have been specifically done in some key states. So there's a lot that can be done, which, really kind of leads us into another thing.
Hey, David, sorry, one more thing on the site before we leave it. Also, just getting registered to vote. If they're not sure or they haven't, you've got a place on the site there where you can actually click to get registered to vote and get that card sent to you if your state requires that. But there's for folks that you don't know, if you've never voted any of that, go to that website. It'll help you get all that done. Go ahead, bro.
For some states, it's going to be too late to register. You have to be 30 days out. On a lot of states, you can register up until the day up. So you'll just have to find your state, but the help is there to get you registered, and I may tell you, I can't do it this year. You have to wait till next year. But nonetheless, the good news is that we have some real clear choices this year. We're not choosing between the bad and the worst, and a lot of times that's what we have. We have some real good choices between good and bad in this one. And if we don't win this, it won't be because that we didn't have good candidates. It'll be because we didn't show up to support those good candidates. So this is kind of preemptive good news, if you will, or predictive good news, or prophetic good news, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, it's good news just to be able to go into the polling place feeling good about your options, that you have somebody to get excited about and go vote for. That's good news in and of itself, that they're even on the ballot.
And the good news also is that you now have information about these folks. You don't have to go in blind and just guess and hold your finger in the wind and see which way it's blowing. You can go in with specific information about, and by the way, you're allowed to carry into polling places all sorts of help to help you vote. I mean, if you want to take voters' guides in there with you, and as you stand there, you can look over each voter's guide and say, oh, this guy, oh, no, I don't want this guy. Maybe you don't know who's on the ballot. You take these voters' guides in, you're allowed to take all sorts of helps in there for your voting. Now, nobody can go in and help you vote, but you can take these things in that allow you to have help when you do vote.
And don't be embarrassed by it. I do that. I mean, we live, breathe, and eat this stuff, but I take voters' guides in because there's so many people on the ballot. There's so, constitutional deals on the ballot. There's so much there. Take those tools in there.
And in virtually every district in the United States, you can print a sample ballot. You can print for your district and see who's on from dog catcher through U.S. Senator. And when you go in, you know who you're going to be voting for, and you can pre-mark that ballot. And you say, well, I don't know about this guy running for the third place on the Judicial Court of Appeals. Well, that's all right. You call some of your friends till some of them do know, and you can find out that every name you're going to vote on. So there should be no surprises. So you can go to all the county and state and city websites, and you can print out sample ballots, and you can take those in with you already marked. And then all you have to do is say, I've already found the answers. I know who I'm voting for. And you just mark it over on the others as you do the real ballot. So there's a lot of resources you can take and use.
One easy place to go to get so many different things, ChristianVoterGuide.com. That's where you can get to the National Black Robe Regiments, where you can get to the voter guides, all kinds of great links, videos that you can show in your church or send out to your friends on Facebook, all kinds of great links. Check it out at ChristianVoterGuide.com. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with David Barton. It's Good News Friday here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Crime is one of America's most serious problems today. Its effects reach not only the direct victims of its violence, but even those who have not been attacked. The concern for crime has not been limited to this century, however. Our founding fathers were also concerned about it. Yet the effects of crime unquestionably were much less in their generation. So what was their deterrent to crime? Signer of the Constitution James McHenry answered that question. He explained, "The Holy Scriptures can alone secure to society order and peace. In vain, without the Bible, we increase penal laws and draw protections around our institutions. Bibles are strong defenses. Where they abound, men cannot pursue wicked courses." Founding Father James McHenry believed that widely teaching the Bible was the best means to deter crime.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. It's Friday, which means it's Good News Friday. We're talking about the good news that there's so many good folks on the ballot this year. You can get great resources there at ChristianVoterGuide.com. wallbuilders.com. David, some folks might say, well, yeah, but even if the good guys win, nothing ever seems to change. It doesn't really make any difference who's in office. Even if the Bible says we're going to rejoice when the righteous are in and groan when the wicked are in, we just seem to only be groaning. Is that true, or does some good things come out of getting the good guys in?
If you believe that nothing happens when you get good guys in, my advice to you is put down the remote and back away from national cable news.
Right.
Because it just doesn't hold up statistically. You look at
listen to more Good News Fridays.
Listen to more Good News Fridays. In 2010, we elected 1,100 state legislators that were pro-life. In other words, a switch of 1,100 legislators that were pro-life. We moved in that direction in that election in 2010. As a result of moving in that election in 2010, what we did, we'd never had a year that had more than 35 pro-life laws ever passed. Well, suddenly I think it was 89 we got the next year, and then 70 the next year. I mean, 3 years in a row, we have blown apart the number of pro-life laws passed by states. Here in Texas, we've gone from having 40 abortion clinics in our state down to 7 abortion clinics in our state. And by the way, we're having a fight with Oklahoma right now over who can be the most pro-life state. Oklahoma wasn't anywhere close to that in 2010. I mean, they've come on like gangbusters. So what happens is understand that the national network media does not cover good changes in social error. And matter of fact, you know, with the debt being what it was, you remember how fast the debt rose from 8 trillion to 17 trillion? Well, it's now risen another 1 trillion over the last 3 or 4 years, but how come it's not rising the way it was 5 years ago? It's because after that 2010 election, guys in the House put their foot down, and even though they don't have the Senate, and even though they passed almost 300 bills that Harry Reid will not take up, they have quit spending money. And so the spending levels are now down to what they were before Obama took office. And that's not because Obama's agreed with that. It's because those guys from 2010 put their foot down and said, well, we're just not giving you, we can't cut it. And so 2008 was still too high under President Bush. I mean, no question that was too high. But at least we're back down to that level. And so the debt is growing at a much, much, much slower rate. So that's good news, even though we've only got one out of the 3 major lawmaking bodies in D.C. We don't have the president. We don't have the Senate. We do have the House. They have made a difference. They have passed 300 laws over there that Harry Reid won't take up. I mean, they have stopped Common Core. They have passed 41 repeals of Obamacare. They've done all this stuff. Just because Harry Reid doesn't pick it up doesn't mean that the guys we put there in 2010 weren't good guys that are fighting their hearts out in this stuff. And yeah, you've always got a few sellouts. And if you're going to look at the exception, not the rule, you'll always be discouraged. But you look at the guys we got there and what a huge difference it made. And that's what we can do this time. We have this kind of opportunity. It is epic.
It's evidence that elections have consequences, that that it does make a difference one way or the other. If our folks will engage, if churches will turn out, if people of faith will go vote their values and make sure that those values get counted by showing up, it will have an impact. There's just no doubt about it. Sometimes it's an impact of just slowing down or making the really bad less bad. But sometimes it's completely reversing it, and we're seeing some of that now. But it's, you know, this is a great opportunity. Like you're saying, they've been able to slow down the bad with just that one side of the Capitol. Imagine if the Senate seats are won this year and you're able to have both sides in unison now trying to reverse a lot of these bad policies. We could really get some good things going.
We could get a lot of good things going, and if that happens, they will also change the way that judges are being done right now, because Harry Reid changed that to where that it now takes a sheer majority, and it's always taken the 2/3 or the 3/5, the 60, the 3/5 of the Senate to do that. And so what has happened is in the last year and a half, they have stacked up these courts with Obama judges. And by the way, if you keep score on marriage, across the nation now, states, I was just in North Carolina, and a judge there struck down the marriage amendment that 60-something% of the state had passed. And up in Idaho, it was way up in the 70s. And a judge, and it's these brand new Obama judges largely that are coming on and striking this stuff down.
And if people think that doesn't have an impact, you just said Idaho, that couple up in Idaho facing jail and fines and everything else, pastors, because they won't perform a homosexual marriage. But with that overturned now, people are going to be, we're going to see those kind of things happening.
Pastors facing jail time because they follow the Bible in America? Are you kidding me? But that's where we are, and that's what's happened. And so if you don't think getting the Senate back, well, getting the House and Senate won't cause Obama to sign bills, no. But they can stop the process again, and they can slow that money down, and they can stop putting the kind of judges on the courts that are being crammed through right now by Harry Reid, and Republicans can't stop. So there's a lot that will change. We don't get the presidency this time, but man, we can make such a huge difference in the other direction. But again, this is good news only if we show up, because
only if we do it.
we do have choices this year, and we've got good choices this year. And it will be good news, November the 5th, if we show up on 4th.
One more break. When we come back, let's talk about what folks at home can do, what pastors can do in these final weeks to encourage their flock to do this. Are they allowed to speak out on these things? And if so, what are some good tools that they can have? Stay with us right back on WallBuilders Live.
In 1776, the difference of one vote gave America the English language instead of German. In 1876, the difference of one vote made Rutherford Hayes President of the United States. In 1923, the difference of one vote gave Adolf Hitler leadership of the Nazi Party. Get the idea? One vote, yours, makes a huge difference. Vote.
This message brought to you by National Religious Broadcasters.
This is Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. The Bible is full of stories of men and women whose faith in God led them to take action during difficult times, trusting that He would work all things out for His glory and the good of His people. Today, God's people are once again being called to take action as we seek to restore the values our nation was founded upon and honor those who have given their lives in defense of our freedom. I'm Governor Bobby Jindal, and I'm asking you to stand up. I'm asking you to vote this November.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday. We've been talking about the candidates on the ballot coming up in the election here in just a matter of days. And the good news that you have some really good options, and it will make a difference in the long run. It will change things. What do we do between now and then, David? And, if I'm not a senator, I'm not a congressman, how can I make a difference? What if I'm a pastor? What can I do to make a difference?
Well, interestingly, for a number of years now, we've had Pulpit Freedom Sunday, started several years ago by Alliance Defending Freedom. Back then, we were wanting to challenge the IRS. We have these lawsuits waiting, constitutional attorneys, Alliance Defending Freedom. And it's going to be easy to strike down what the IRS tries to do with churches. We've had several programs on this across the years, and way back then they got, I think, 33 or 34 pastors willing to talk about political issues in the upcoming election, and they turned all those pastors in the IRS, and the IRS wouldn't touch them. And then I think it went to 35, and then it went to 85 or whatever, and then went up to like 100, and then it went to 500. And so we had just a couple of weeks ago, we had a program with Jim Garlow on Pulpit Freedom Sunday, encouraging people to get their pastors to speak up on that Sunday. We also had Tony Perkins on talking about that. And so, there's been a push to do this. And the result was this year there were 1,800 pastors that stepped up on Sunday morning to talk about political things facing the country. And they're not talking.
Now that's 1,800 that were in conjunction with this particular date. There are probably a ton of other ones that also did it that just weren't on that particular, email list and signed up on that deal. But anyway, thousands of pastors for sure that are speaking up. Go ahead.
And let me tell you for sure, if you as a pastor don't have something political you can speak about on Sundays because you don't know what the news is and you don't know what the Bible says. Because in this climate today, there is so much low-hanging fruit. For example, you just mentioned Idaho, those pastors looking at jail time because they follow what the Bible says. You can't find that in American history. You'll find that in the news. If you don't find that worthy to preach about, if you don't find that worthy of being mentioned, and what elections will do with that issue, then you know nothing of the Bible, you know nothing of history, and you're really not concerned about your community anyway, to be quite frank. If you don't think that you should take a stand on issues like that, if you don't think that you should take a stand on what the president has done with Israel, then you know nothing of the Bible, you know nothing of current affairs, and you're not relevant for your community anyway. You've got no influence outside the four walls of the church. If you can look at what's happening with the rights of conscience, what's happening with military, religious expression in the military, if you can't look at issues like that and find something to be talked about, if you can't look at governor's races and talk about the issues that are at stake in governor's races, and particularly Maine. I can go to Maine. I can go back to Kansas, all the issues. I can go to all the issues in Florida with Scott and Chris. If you can't find a biblical worldview difference between the major issues you'll be living with for the next 4 years, then I don't know why in the world you think God called you to the ministry, because you're not a mouthpiece for His values, you're not a mouthpiece for what His Word says, and you are not a watchman on the wall to warn the sheep of the danger that's coming to the flock. And forgive me for being blunt, But that's just where we are.
But we need to
culture.
be. We need to be. It's had such a huge impact. It's the reason that we're in the mess we're in because the church stepped out.
Well, let me just. I mean, we got the Houston situation.
Yeah.
You have the mayor of Houston who has subpoenaed the pastors and 17 forms of communication from these churches because they want to see what they did in the petition drive. And by the way, under the IRS code, you're allowed to get involved in any issue you want to. Now, under the IRS code, you can't stand and endorse a Republican or Democrat, but in this transgender bathroom bill, you have every right. And so here the attorneys for the mayor are petitioning and subpoenaing sermons. We want to see what you said to your people about whether they should get involved in this petition drive, whether they should sign the petition on the transgender bill. We want to see your emails. We want to see your Facebook correspondence. We want to see your phone logs. You mean to tell me that you don't find that disturbing as a pastor? And you're not going to talk about that? And by the way, I love what's going on. They subpoenaed the sermons of those 5 pastors in Houston. And what's happened is pastors all across the United States says, you want sermons? Have some sermons. And they're sending sermons to the mayor of Houston from all over the United States. And you want sermons?
Great.
You know, that's the response it ought to be. These guys ought to be scared to death to petition the sermon. Free speech exists for the church, too. It is not just for secular folks. So, again, you know, the good news is we had 1,800 pastors stand up this year, and they see the importance and the necessity, and there's a lot we can all do, but we can have a lot of good news 3 weeks from now if we will just get involved right now.
ChristianVoterGuide.com has all the resources, whether you're pastor, layman, whatever. Get those resources, share them with your friends and family. Encourage your pastor to speak out this coming Sunday and next Sunday on the elections and what's happening. Thanks for listening today to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.